Righto, that's carried. Chairperson's report. Are there any questions of the chairperson about this report? If not, will somebody like to move?
Yes, I do.
Oh, you go for it. Yep.
Thank you. Let me just put the on there. I've seen the file notes and of the conversation that you had with Louise Mason around the Erebus workaround.
Yep.
And I'm confused, and it'd be really helpful if you could just clarify for me, because in it says you did talk to the ministry about. In effect, did you do? Because I still don't know, and I'm still cheesed off about it.
Well, I asked people how they were inclined to vote, not how they were definitely going to vote at that stage. And I did not communicate that decision to the ministry.
My question was, did you communicate it to?
Well, that's so long ago. I find that the only people that I spoke to about it besides yourselves were council staff. And I'm not sure which agencies I spoke to with respect to council staff. I think they listed the agencies who would have had an interest, which are community facilities, the mayor's office and the communications staff. It's just so long ago, I'm not certain which of those I spoke to. I know I've been speaking to each of them before we had that indicative vote. I'm not sure exactly which of them I spoke to after.
Would it be fair to say that conversation, everyone had an understanding it was Chatham House rules?
In what sense?
In that it was a closed conversation.
I don't know, this is a workshop. I'm not quite sure what.
So is everything that's discussed at the workshop free for disclosure outside of the room?
It's not confidential.
It wasn't confidential.
Okay.
I mean, we could have said.
I think I'd be in so much trouble.
It would
if I
have
could get
been
off.
very helpful if prior to that workaround you said, I'm seeking this information so I can give it to somebody that's going to pass it to the ministry.
Well, I didn't know whether anyone was going to pass it to the ministry, but I thought I'm just identifying the sort of parts of the council who are very interested in the likely outcome and acknowledging that I may well have communicated that indicative vote to somebody from those three places.
And then magically they withdraw their application and land on your approval. Anyway, the other question that I had in your capacity as chair is the board resolution on the 3rd of November relating to the native forest at Western Springs. Is it being implemented to your satisfaction?
Yes.
So I'm referring obviously to the VISA report and the technology and the methods that were to be used where legally possible. Are they being used where legally possible?
They've been technologically improved since the resolution.
Rubbish. Thank you. So if Professor Visser was to turn up tomorrow and have a look on the site, he'd be stoked.
Probably, but I don't know. I mean, we certainly, as a result of that issue being raised, I asked staff to seek Professor Visser's opinion. I have to get back on that.
So could we invite him up? I think if somebody mentioned it would be quite useful if we as a board visited the site, on a legal basis of course, and preferably with Professor Visser.
Well, I personally don't see any particular value in Professor Visser or meeting with him. I'm certainly hoping that we will visit the site soon after the last of the pine trees is removed.
Like in a week?
Can I raise a point of order? I don't think that any of this is mentioned on Richard's report. And I do think also, I think that might be a standing order issue, but I think it would be a valuable conversation to have later on. I think and I'm sorry, I might be reaching standing orders myself by saying this, but I think a number of us have asked for more information, and I believe that staff are trying to find that information, and I think a number of us would like to visit the site, and I think that's being relayed, and I think with all this going on, until we know, because we can't be on the site right now, we're in danger. So,
we can be on the site. We can be on the site if Richard and the majority of the board requested that we wanted to go on the site for an hour. I bet you we would be allowed to do so. Not while machinery is happening, but at either 7 o'clock in the morning or at 3 o'clock in the
totally so,
afternoon.
and that I think that request has already gone through to staff, and I think staff are going to come back to us.
And when did it go to staff?
It was more than a week ago.
So why is it taking so long to come back to us?
I think this is also not a time to place to discuss this, because we are asking questions on Richard's report, but I do think it's a good conversation to have after the meeting to follow this up.
But my point, I think, I mean, I do understand the point around the report, but we have a very upset, broken community, and that there is nothing about it in the chair's report. That Ngāti Whātua has written to the ministry on the Erebus Memorial questioning the size of it and the appetite for it by the Erebus families is also not in Richard's report. So, you know, our reports need to be more than I've been to an Anzac Day service and I've gone to the opening of a playground. They need to be about nitty-gritty topics that our constituents want to hear about.
And speaking
Okay, are
of
there any other
those,
questions? Somebody like to move, receive my report, is Graham, second Alex, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no, that's carried. And then we come to the next one. Yes, board member reports, and Adriana's, any questions of Adriana? Oh, no, Adriana, you're allowed to say something, or to elaborate on it.
yeah, because I not just went to the Anzac ceremony and opened one playground, but I also did quite a few other things. Thanks for that shade that you threw across the table.
I have read your report. Thank you, Adriana. You've been to many things. Congratulations.
Any questions of Adriana?
I haven't finished, sorry, Richard, I was just
Sorry.
about to start talking.
You talk, yes.
Thank you. Now, I want to take this opportunity to raise quite a few issues that I'm having with contractors. Now, this is not wanting to throw so much hate to community facilities, but unfortunately, I'm getting quite a number of complaints from residents that are saying the younger seedlings that they planted last winter, not last Christmas, are being attacked by weed whackers, and then they're dying, which is really upsetting, right? And then we also have quite a few issues with another contractor called Ames, because whenever I log the morning glories that are being growing and all the moth plants, our Ventia contractors are doing pretty well, but then Ames are just ignoring it and letting it kind of just grow and take over our native plants. And I also thought I should share that I'm having a bit of, I'm picking a bit of interest with resource consents, given that right next to my house, I have slipped and I have fallen because there's a building that has leaked a bunch of weird sediment onto the footpath of my local park. And if I'm pretty able, I can imagine that there's a lot of senior people in my community that would be running a risk. So I'm wondering if there's some enforcements, or if there is a compliance officer that goes and checks up on the resource consent buildings, because it seems like I had to call and go through quite a few conversations on the phone instead of someone auditing a building site, which I think is quite needed, especially next to such a lovely, valuable park. And that will be enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions of Adriana?
Yes, I do.
Yep.
Are they related to the report? Because if not, I'm not answering.
They're related to your portfolio. So same question as I asked the chair, given that you have the portfolio of parks. The board resolution on the 3rd of November 2020 relating to the native forest at Western Springs, is it being implemented to your satisfaction, specifically the methods and the technologies identified by Professor Visser where legally possible?
That's a very simple question, Sarah. I voted against that resolution, so my decision stays there in November.
So just to clarify your role as Parks Portfolio is to ensure that that resolution, and it's the chair's responsibility and all of ours, but primarily the chair's and yours, is to ensure that that resolution is being implemented. Is it being
Point of order, I
implemented
believe it's
to
actually the
your,
CEO's.
excuse me?
Point of order. It's an
Point of
accusation.
order.
Yeah, I
It's
mean,
an accusation.
this is not an appropriate question.
So can we answer the point of order, please?
Yes, I agree with the point of order.
So can I just clarify that I cannot, in this public meeting, ask the chair or the portfolio of parks,
It's not in my
portfolio
role.
holder, about the implementation of the resolution. Is that what you're saying?
What's my role description?
Yes or no?
She's just creating a new job for me.
Yeah,
Can you answer that question? Because I want
I've answered
clarification.
it in terms of my role as chair, and the actual details of implementation are up to the chief executive. Do you have any other questions?
So I just want to be sure that what I've heard is that I cannot ask you or Member Christie about the implementation of the resolution.
I've answered from
Right.
my point of view.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Were there any questions?
The council's lawyers disagree with you, but just shows the utter chaos and misinformation that I put up with for 18
I
months
should
on
be
the
paid way
on the
more if that
issue.
was
We
my
go
job.
on to
So, my
Alex.
second question for Adriana is, in a recent Facebook post, you said, regardless of my views on Western Springs Forest, an elected member calling a staff member names, or saying they're inept, and making fun of their personal life is
not-
utterly pathetic.
This is
I'm
not
disgusted
in
in my
Alex
colleagues'
and
behaviour.
Adriana's report.
Is there anyone in this room you're referring to in that post?
This is not in
You-
Adriana's
Me?
report.
Yeah, thank you. Could you,
Can
in
we
light
just
of
go
that,
on to Alex's report
could
now?
you
Thank
please explain
This is
what
not-
name I called it? No, what we've got here, Richard, is we've got a professional local board member
Sorry.
pushing this information up on Facebook.
Members,
I've
I'm not a
got
point of order
no-
has been read.
Hang on a minute, I'm calling a point of order, please. Can I call a point of order? Because I believe that if there are issues around the reports, in addition to the information that's being shared, then we as a board need to discuss that outside of this forum, because.
Why outside of this
Well,
forum?
it's not in the report, and it should be discussed externally. Thank you. We're now on to Alex's report. Is there anything you want to say?
So that will be put on the workshop?
I don't know if it's in the work, can be raised in a workshop, absolutely.
So where could it, will it be in the next workshop?
It will come up, it can come up at administration time, that's
At the
fine.
next workshop?
Yes,
Thank you
it's
very
fine.
much.
Alex?
So I would report.
And I made a
Thank you.
Yeah, great report.
Thank you very much. Well, you've read it. This is marvellous. Are there any questions on my report? Be happy to ask.
Data piece, it seems a really complete report, so we'll now go on to Graham's.
I'll take my report as read. Any questions?
Any questions?
Is there any update on the viaduct upset business owners and residents?
Yeah, so there were immediate resolutions that were done. So the removal of fences straight away. They were still under construction, so they've added more. There is bike racks there. That was one point that was raised, and they've now completed it. They've completed the section outside Solbart, but actually Sol. Whether it's fully complete now, I can't tell you. The Auckland Transport is working to put together a public forum that they will host in the next couple of weeks, but they haven't given me a date yet.
When does the trial finish? What day?
Sorry, can't hear you.
I believe that Sarah asked her when the trial finished. I believe it was a 3-month trial.
Yeah, that's my 3 months. It hasn't started yet because they haven't quite got it all out, have they?
Must be touch and go.
We got an email today.
It's now started. Okay.
3 months ago.
So what was the date it started, sorry?
Probably today, you think.
Okay.
Thank you, Graham.
Member Leonie?
Hi, kia ora koutou.
So I hold the portfolios for Māori outcomes in arts, culture and events. I also lead on the Grafton Business Association as well as the Uptown Business Association. So this month has been very busy in terms of looking at our new Māori outcomes portfolio and getting out into the community with a number of board members here actually to get some of the initial feedback on how we can partner with the existing organisations that are already working in this space. So an example of that has been with the Auckland City Mission, where myself and a number of board members here have been up to talk to them about Māori outcomes for the local board and what we're hoping to achieve. We're aware of the time frame. Obviously we have half a term left to actually meet some of these outcomes. So we've been very specific in looking at activities that we could partner on that would be achievable within the next 18 months. So two of those have been around community gardens, and one of the other recommendations have been around looking at kapahaka within the city centre that's open to all constituents within the Waitemata. So looking at breaking down some of those cultural barriers. I just want to also acknowledge Shamila, I don't know where she is at the moment, and the amazing work that she has done in terms of the stakeholder mapping work where we've identified what she has identified with the advisors. I think we've looked at least it sounds like it's around 60 to 100 Māori organisations that are here within the Waitemata. So holding a hui with them and then holding a separate hui with mana whenua. And for those mana whenua who can't attend, we would look at having one-to-one kōrero with them. So I think we have a very detailed approach to how we can move forward with that. We know that it's obviously not going to be easy given it's a new portfolio, but very passionate about seeing some change in that area. So in addition to that, I think that the other key issues for myself really is looking at the homelessness situation, the continuing impact of our 501 detainees being here in the city centre, the growing number of obviously homeless residents that have nothing to do during the day, and with it, I have this real passion that we can partner with these organisations to look at these activities and address that, in addition to the Kainga Ora hui that we've had earlier in the month on Grays Ave, where we're looking at having 250 apartments with, I would describe as vulnerable whānau that will be living in the Waitemata, and what we can be doing proactively before they actually move into these apartments, and working with organisations, because rather than be the ambulance at the bottom of the hill, what can we be putting into place now? So that's really exciting mahi that we're doing. So in addition to that, obviously attended events, Anzac Day, the Business Accelerator event, which was hosted by the Greyland Business Association, which AT were at, and we've had some great presentations around Great North Road and the future. So I think that there's still obviously an excessive amount of work that needs to be done to really ensure that we have some tangible activities that will take place for Māori outcomes. Our arts events and community, I've been very active in that space as well, attending different events. It's been a really interesting month, but yeah, so looking forward to this next 18 months and continuing to work on those things. Kia ora.
All right. Any questions of Corinne? Yes, Alex.
Kevin, thank you for your verbal report. It's really great, and I think the conversations that you've been having have been really, really useful. And I was wondering what has come out of some of the conversations with the City Mission about good ways forward.
So I think those two things that we've discussed was around the community gardens and the kapahaka. But, I think you know, there's a real need to build relationships with these organisations, and the first two hui, I believe, have been probably more around building those relationships, and as we continue to meet, hopefully on a weekly basis, more ideas will come to fruition and come out of that, so looking forward to that.
Any other questions, Sarah?
Kia ora, Karen, that's a great report. I was just interested in what you made of that letter from Ngāti Whātua to the Chief Executive of the Ministry of Culture and Heritage, with their two areas of focus, one on the Erebus whānau support, or lack of, and also on the size and scale of the memorial.
So I think in relation to the Erebus Memorial, what we do have is obviously the Ngāti Whātua Rākei, and we have other branches of Ngāti Whātua, which I'm well aware that, like many other iwi, including my own as a Ngāti Pawa Wahine, we have many different parts of that iwi. So from the perspective of Ngāti Whātua Rākei, I know that they have a clear view. Taking into account the views that have come in via the letter, I appreciate those views and definitely take them on board. So I think it's important that we continue to receive that information and take that into account. So that would be my response.
Any other questions? Okay, Member Sandilands?
Yeah, so I tabled a report earlier today, and so if you guys remember back when we were doing our local board outcomes, and I said I wanted Waitemata to be fluent in Te Reo Māori, and you guys all totally thought it was a realistic goal, and you all totally got behind it, and so I've been using my board reports, the last 6 maybe, to teach Te Reo Māori by stealth, and so, because, you're reading and everything. But one thing I didn't put in my report, because it's sort of only marginally, not really board focused, but still I want to let you know, is that as a result of doing that work, I've started a few social media accounts dedicated to teaching people Te Reo Māori. So if you want to get to practice beyond my board report, you can.
Thank you. Any questions?
Would those, oh sorry, I have to wait.
Yes. Right.
How often would you be offering free classes?
So those social media accounts get a post teaching you something every single day. So
That's great to hear.
Can you tell us the name, please?
Limero, which means 500.
Thank you.
That's how many days it was up there.
Alex?
From the overt pushing of Julie Sandilands and the more subtle and caring approach of Corinne Leone, I have signed up for the Kura Kawana Te Reo course, which starts on Friday. And I will be better than I was. So, but my question is, I just wondered if there was any further progress on the conversations about water, or any of the other big conversation about fresh water strategy or anything like that, and I just wondered where the opportunities are to try and feed into those conversations.
So I don't think I've got any updates beyond what the board runs.
Okay.
Have you got any?
No, it wasn't to leave
last
because it
thing
was
or
just feels like.
But you're right, actually, now that you mention it, it feels like all of a sudden there was. And
There was. Now there's lots of video and now it's, yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Adriana?
Member Sandilands, since I haven't read your report, I'm sorry, I apologize. I was wondering if you ever received a role description for your portfolio. And I'm also wondering if ensuring that the sustainability of every resolution that is passed is your responsibility.
So I think no to both of those.
Thank you.
Sarah?
Thank you. I did read your report, and to be honest, I didn't understand it. So I guess for me, I'd be interested, what are the 2 things you're most proud of, putting aside your interest in Te Ao Māori, that you've achieved for the people of Waitemata this month?
I guess that, all the work that we do in our workshops is stuff that I'm proud of, and I mentioned in the report that, this month we've got our grants rounds, which is a significant thing that we do, and so contributing my feedback to that in the report, and, you know, in our workshops and as something we do is, I think, what I'm proudest of.
Thank you. Sarah?
So I will table both Councillor Coombe and Member Christie's Facebook posts in my report, so that they're in the minutes. They're unprofessional and they strike at the very core of the bullying that the CEO is trying to stamp out. And I'd like to focus on two matters briefly and then make some comments about the wellbeing in our communities, and particularly wellbeing when they bring issues to us. So firstly, I'd like to table the letter from Ngāti Whātua, so it makes the minutes. You've all seen a copy of that, and it questions, as you know, the size of the Erebus Memorial and also whether Erebus whānau were particularly interested in it being there. Secondly, I'm going to table my letter sent by John Billington QC to the Chief Executive of Auckland Council, Jim Staback, and it's self-explanatory, but in essence it requests a meeting to discuss my concerns that the work being carried out by Auckland Council on behalf of us as a board is not being carried out in accordance with the methods identified by Professor Visser to the extent legally possible. Now, the Chief Executive said, no, there's no need for me to meet you, there's a proper process and you should go and ask the Chair and the Parks portfolio holder, which of course I did in this meeting, and you've shut me down. So, short of getting a QC on board, getting arrested to bring attention to the lack of quality information, I have absolutely no idea what more I can do to ensure quality information comes to me, you, and more importantly, the members of our community. But I would like to comment on the important review into wellbeing at Auckland Council released by the Chief Executive yesterday. It was silent on the emotional harm and distress caused to our communities when there's a lack of authentic engagement. And I hope a similar review, and perhaps this is something that we can discuss in a workshop, will be held to explore that. The wellbeing review that was released yesterday, in my mind, it is a classic answer to the current problems on Western Springs Forest Community Liaison Group. My comments that I'm about to say specifically relate to Western Springs Forest. And it seems that senior staff feel empowered by this review to not engage with our community, asserting health and safety. And interesting, when DLA Piper wrote back to my QC, they referred to it there as well. So suddenly we're seeing the smattering of health and safety concerns for senior staff. You know, people on this project aren't the local librarian having to deal with homeless people that come into the library. They are sophisticated administrators and need to be able to handle the job that they're given, or at least have the skills to step aside if they are not coping with the job. For the staff, for Jim Staback to advise the chair of the Community Liaison Group that no council member will turn up to last night's Community Liaison Group, I just think is absolutely appalling.
Agree.
Anyway, the answer isn't to simply disengage from our community. The council is there to serve our community. Overall, the wellbeing review seems one-sided to the situation of staff regarding external parties. And when I say external parties, I'm referring to the communities that we serve, the people that we serve. And we've heard today from Bootsy and from Annie about how stressful it is to engage with us. This aspect of the report has looked effectively at a situation of engaging with communities, but without context. What are the views of elected members and what are the views of the public whom they have uncritically asserted are aggressive and antisocial? Why haven't our communities been part of this review when several thousand staff members have been? There seems to be a very real failing in this review, and one that I will communicate to the Chief Executive. We have a crisis of democracy here. We're reminded of that every single one of our meetings. We have people all over our city who have never protested before, camping in parks, getting arrested, standing up for fair process and quality community consultation. They are almost broken. I've seen them crying, I've seen them on sick leave, I've heard that they've not been able to get through mental health lines because they're jammed up, and I see a council that doesn't care. What is the definition of aggressive and antisocial in this wellbeing report? It's not there, and I have asked the Chief Executive for the terms of reference of the report. To what extent has council been aggressive and antisocial towards residents and ratepayers? To what extent has council's behaviour caused the behaviour that they then say is aggressive and antisocial? From where I sit as an elected member, I see small pockets of council behaving very badly. In the room here. So, who's looking at the wellbeing for residents and ratepayers when they come to us with genuine and authentic commitment to doing the right thing by their communities? I'm referring to the Anna Radfords, the Joe Malcolms, the Deborah Mannings of the world. People who put hundreds of unpaid hours into community service, holding us to account and holding the council to account. They come before us because they care deeply about their community issues. They are broken, we break them, the council breaks them. My observation is that if these people who have best intentions take a position that is opposite to what we as the council or the local board want to achieve, we dissemble and at best we humour them. But ultimately we tie them in knots with downright lies, carefully disguised as a thoughtful response, just in case the Ombudsman needs to have a look at the paperwork. We do this until our community gives up advocating for what is right for their communities, or as I say, until we break them. We have 4 people in our community gallery today. Our community have lost interest in us. So who gets to draw the line regarding the public, or in my case as an elected member, wanting accurate information and transparent decision making, and a small but senior pocket of staff avoiding this by saying it's affecting their well-being, as we saw last night at the CLG meeting? This approach, I fear, will shut down dialogue between council officials and the public. It will heighten the often most unfortunate adversarial stance between council and communities, when the council is supposed to be part of a democratic exercise that doesn't seem to be acknowledged anywhere. Hence my request for a review of how we engage with our communities as well. The review also failed to look at how staff might need better training regarding how to provide information and de-escalate situations. I fear this report will empower senior officials involved in the Western Springs Forest debacle, and that's exactly what it is, to continue their approach to not constructively or productively engage with the public, and will instead give them cover to act with impunity. So if democracy is to thrive, council leadership, starting with the mayor and the CEO, must be inclusive and it must be authentic.
Move that the Waitemata local board
Take any questions?
I have a question.
All right.
Sorry, but it's about, it's not anything that's on your report, but it is about your portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
So it was about input we have into procurement policy, because you have a lot of business experience, and I'm just wondering how we can input into procurement policy so that we can enable capacity building in our small to medium-sized enterprises, even our large New Zealand enterprises, to try and boost the local economy without breaching free trade rules. I mean, at the moment, a huge amount of our contracts end up being with international corporations, and while not wanting to breach free trade rules, how can we actually end up, we've heard about failures in some of our contractors, and we want to have the living wage for all our contractors, we want to have really good outcomes for all of our community residents. I'm just wondering whether there's anything that we can do from a notice of motion perspective or anything else to really help support our local businesses.
Look, I'm very happy to answer questions that are not in my report on anything to do with my portfolio. That's my job as an elected member. On procurement, thank you.
On procurement,
It would have been helpful, Adriana, thank you for the clap, but it would have been helpful if you would do the same. On procurement, what we need to do as a starter is have staff go and talk to the people at procurement and ask them to come to our workshop. Because I notice, of course, with the economic development plan that we've just passed, we've talked about procurement supporting local businesses, but we actually didn't take it a step further to speak to the kaupapa around supporting Māori business. So there's no breach of the Fair Trading Act or the Commerce Act in actually having a policy that asks for opportunities to be given to businesses within the Waitemata for things that Waitemata Local Board or the council is purchasing on behalf of the Waitemata Local Board area. So it's not a complex conversation, but it's one that takes quite a while as we work out the framework for what businesses we do want to be given opportunities. I mean, there are plenty of government contracts, for example, the shovel-ready projects, where they are let on the basis that Māori and Pacifica will make up X% of the workforce that will be hired for that project. You've also got, I imagine, Ngāti Whātua will let contracts and say, but you must employ X number of people that fuck up to Ngāti Whātua.
I think I'm more interested, not quite, because yes, we can do that, but I'm more interested in actually supporting New Zealand headquartered businesses rather than just hiring people from different demographics to actually
that was just an example. Yeah, so
Okay.
what we need to do is then we need to say to procurement, subject to a wider discussion on this, is these are the sorts of products and services that council are procuring, and we would like, as you procure them, to see a list of New Zealand-based companies, preferably in the Waitemata in my opinion, but that might not be everybody's opinion, who can be given the opportunity to tender for those. And it might be that there's some assistance available to companies that haven't gone through a council tender process before. And again, that's not an unfair advantage. That's actually making sure there's an equitable
For sure.
playing field.
Is this a project you'd be interested in leading?
I am deeply concerned. I'm very happy to support it and actively engage in it. I wouldn't lead it from the perspective that it's something that at the end of my term I want to say, here's what I've achieved. Because what I found is whether it's the viaduct, upset residents and businesses down there, or whether it's Western Springs Forest, or whether it's the Erebus Memorial, even though the economic development portfolio allocation of finance is quite low, I actually get pulled into lots of other portfolios that frankly I prefer not to be. So subject to other members stepping up and doing their job properly, absolutely I'd love to.
So I'd like to move that the Waitemata Local Board receive the written reports from members Christie, Bonham and Gunthorpe and the verbal updates from members Leone, Sandwich and Trotman. Do we have a seconder? Seconded Corinne.
I'd say table report.
Those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no, that's carried. Governance work calendar. I'll move that the Waitemata Local Board receive the governance forward work calendar as at 8th May 2021. Is there a seconder? Graham. Any discussion? All those in favour say aye. Contrary, no, that's carried. Waitemata Local Board workshop records. I'll move that the Waitemata Local Board receive the Waitemata Local Board workshop records for the workshops held 13 April, 20 April, 27 April and 4 May 2021. Is there a seconder? Seconder Corinne. Any discussion? All those in favour will say aye. Aye. Contrary, no, that's carried. Are there any extraordinary items? There are no.
I'd just like to make a mind.
Well, it's not, we finished the business. We didn't decide there were going to be any extraordinary items.
So just to clarify, we just had a situation where I asked somebody a question about their portfolio and was shut down, and then Alex asked me a question about my portfolio, which of course as a local board member I expect to be asked, whether it's in my report or not. So my question is, prior to coming to the next business meeting, can we have some very clear guidelines around what questions can be asked? Because I find it quite staggering that I can't ask in a public meeting if a resolution is being carried out to the portfolio holder or the chair's satisfaction. Now, I don't mind if the answer is, look, I don't know, I'll come back to you within a week.
Graham?
Sorry, the only reason I raised point forward was you implied that it was the portfolio holder's, shall I say, responsibility, whereas I have asked this before.
No, it's the chief executive.
It's the chief executive, that's all
Right.
that was my point of order.
Yeah, I mean, people are welcome to ask, but they need only respond on things that are in their report, but hopefully in general.
But what happens if we've got, say for example, 100 people camping in Duckmire Business Park, and the parks portfolio holder doesn't put it in her report?
I visit
It's no
and
longer-
we-
It's no
that's-
longer our
That's
responsibility,
great
that
that Adriana
particular
visits.
question.
Well, that would then beg the question of why Adriana visits every week. I'm using that as an example, Adriana, because if you visit every week, wouldn't it be in your report?
No.
With respect, Member Trotman, there is section 42A of the Local Government Act, which clearly you received an email on the 15th of April that has asked you to please not ask questions. And I could read this whole 3-page document to you
No,
again.
I'd rather not.
But
I'm
it
very familiar
states-
with that.
oh, well,
I wrote back and I said, this is the email
Look,
from
I'm
Louise
sorry.
Mason.
This
I
is
wrote
not a
back.
matter of business, so we're
Happy
no
to answer the
consideration
question
of
if you'd like me to.
extraordinary items.
You know your act
The-
well then.
I declare the meeting closed at 4:50 p.m. Thank you very much.